Welcome back, guys. In today's video, we're going to focus strictly on how to wire up our electric kits for the 3C Miniworks ERuck kits. So we're going to cover every connector, how it goes into the controller, how to plug in your ignition, step by step. So if you buy a kit, you can confidently know that you are going to be able to install this without any problem. Let's get into it. Worth noting that before we even dive into electrical aspect of wiring everything up, there's a few components that we need to make sure are on the bike before starting the process at all. So one being the controller. That bolts onto our controller bracket that goes onto the rear tail here. So get the controller on there, and then you can plug the harness in, the sub harness for the controller, just one big connector, so you'll know that that goes right in the top. Additionally, you'll want to have your handlebars on and your speedometer. It's not 100% necessary, but it allows you to make sure that you can do everything in one foul swoop. Makes it easy. So then you put your main harness that comes in the kit. It's a long piece. I already have it kind of tucked under here. You'll have the back coming out here, which you can see will have the relay connector and then a bunch of other things. This will also have eyelets on it, so you know it's in the rear. You can see those positive and negative, the red and the green eyelets. So that'll want to be in the rear of the bike. I run mine up under the battery tray. How you decide to do yours is solely up to you. And then the front one, you'll know, has this red connector, horn switch, your main connector for the ignition. So you want that to kind of be tucked into the battery box area, and then the rest kind of in the back, and then we can start the process as a whole. Additionally, in your kit, you will have a DC to DC converter that converts your 72 volt from your battery to a 12 volt, so you can run your basic motorcycle lights, and then your relay, which is a 72 volt relay. You'll want to make those fit underneath the seat. It's important to offset them to the right or the left so that you don't hit this bar, so that when it closes, you can see underneath there, it clears just fine. Super important, you do need those in order to wire up electrical stuff. Once you have all the components in place on the bike, you'll have to wire in a couple things. Super easy. These eyelet terminals that are on the rear of the harness need to be converted to an XT60 connector, because those will plug into the connectors on the battery leads. You only need to plug in one of those because the other one will serve as your charging port. So in this case, what we need to do is connect the red to the red, positive to positive, and then the green to the black, which is negative to negative. How you decide to do this is up to you. What I like to do is use these shrink wrap connectors, and they have a little bit of solder in the middle. When you heat it up, it helps bond the middle. And then whatever you do, make sure you heat shrink it. Protect your investment. You don't want this to fail on you. If it fails, ultimately the bike could fail. So do your due diligence and make sure you do this properly. You don't want to cut corners here. Literally a $20 trip to the parts store could save you an entire build worth of headache. And then here's a quick video of how it should look when you're done. Again, red to red, green to black. And then my connectors have a glue on each side, some solder in the middle, and then glue on each side on the other side as well. I apologize, the focus here kind of sucks, but after this video, I'll go ahead and slide the heat shrink over and then heat wrap that on so that it helps protect that outside of the glue. It kind of gives it an extra layer of protection so moisture doesn't get into the connections. Now that those are nice and heat shrinked up, that'll keep them safe from the elements. Again, minimally invasive, not too crazy to wire in, but you do need that connector into the battery. Now we'll move up to the front, which are these two connectors. These are going to be your ignition switch, so we'll wire those into the actual keyed ignition. It normally comes with this white connector on these. I went ahead and took that out. You can basically just shove a pick into each of the connectors and then that'll pop off. But honestly, you don't need this, so you can go ahead and cut those if you want. In order to wire this to your ignition, you will need this part from Steady Garage. It is part number ETC1001. And what these are connectors for your factory ignition. So you can see here, it comes with this little white connector, and you basically just wire in two wires. It's super important that these go wired in on the left two slots, because those are actually what controls your ignition. The right slot is for an anti-theft, which we do not need in our builds, so just the left two need wired. Again, that is ETC1001, and then we will wire this those two wires into there. It does not matter if what wire goes to red and what wire goes to yellow. All that this is it's a completion of the circuit. So once these close, which is what happens when you turn your ignition, that loops those wires, thus turning the bike on. So it does not matter what color wires you use for this or which ones you connect where, as long as two are connected there and then these run to the ignition, you'll be totally fine. Then what you're left with, once you heat shrink and connect those, again, is the connector aligned all the way down with the red and the yellow, which are your ignition. I used yellow on this just because I didn't have any more black, and I figured why not use it, because otherwise I'm not going to use it for anything else. This is tucked in the battery box, so it really doesn't matter what color you use, but this is really nice. I also recommend if you can find a heat shrink with a glue on the inside, you can't really see, it's hard to tell with the camera because it doesn't focus well, but it has a glue that when you heat shrink it, it pushes all that glue out and it just seals everything. Super nice, highly recommend it. So from there, we'll go ahead and hook this up to the ignition and start with the horn. There's an open space on the inside of the battery box bracket that you can run the ignition cord through, and then that just plugs into the back side of the ignition itself right there. Had to put the camera down to get two hands in there, but you can see goes right into the back of the ignition. The other thing that we need to wire up, should you want to run a horn, which is going to be tucked way in the front here, kind of behind these three vents, you need this connector. It is a horn connector. This will slide right into a factory Ruckus horn. I highly recommend running a horn just for safety's sake. Again, electric, this is a silent bike. I know a lot of people are like, horns are dumb, why would I run that? Just please do this for safety standpoint. It is a liability. So we need to fish this through and then plug it into the horn as well. Had to put the camera down again just to fit that in there. You can see the horn connectors back behind here. And man, did I make that way harder on myself. If you guys were smart, take off the battery cover if it's not off already for your build, and do it that way, because this is a real pain. I enjoy the challenge, I guess. But yeah, that takes care of that. So now we can move on to all this mishmash of other connectors over here. So the first thing we can get out of the way is on each side you have your brake switch for your disc brakes. If you only want to run one brake, you can do that, but you have two sets here. So this is for your brake switch. It does not matter the yellow and green and the black of each one. It does not matter which connector it goes to on your brake switch. There are two, again, interchangeable, just like the ignition. If you're gonna run one brake, just use one set of these wires and then just tuck the other one back in the battery box. If you're gonna use two, just run one to each sensor. So the biggest thing here is if you run these brake sensors, what do? One, they trigger your brake switch, so it tells people that, you're braking. Two, these are directly relative to your regen. So very, very important. If you do not run these sensors, you will not have regen braking. That's fine with some people. With me, I want regen. I love it. It helps you get longer range, so why wouldn't you? In my case, I'll plug these in to my front brake switch because I only run a front brake. And then I will also plug them to my rear brake, even though I do not run a rear brake. And what that does is it allows me to just use my regen brake solely on my rear without even having a brake disc. With the brake switches installed, you can go ahead and move to this conglomerate of connectors here. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up the tripod so that you guys can see what each connector does, where it goes, that kind of thing. Each switch has two connectors coming off of them that you'll have to plug in. This one has an extra one as well. And they are labeled on the harness, so you can see it actually says speedometer, left switch, right switch. So you're gonna plug those in. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, follow exactly what it says. So what we're looking for here is the left switch, which is going to be the big red one. That'll click into place, and you'll see another one that says left switch somewhere in here. You'll just kind of have to feed through the wires, figure out which is which. Again, self-explanatory, just look for what it says on the harness and it'll walk you through that. The right switch will go into these ones. So you have three connectors there. The nice thing about the part up front is you don't actually have to really watch wire color like you do on the rear. but I'll walk you through that as well. So that's why I'm kind of just quickly plugging this in. It'll be self-explanatory when you have it in front of you. It is all nicely labeled so that you're not going to run into any issues. And then additionally, you will also have this, which is a big connector that runs to your speedometer. So it's got a big one that goes into the back of your speedometer, and then these two go into here. So you have one, and then the other one is somewhere again in this mishmash of stuff. There it is. Obviously, I'm not making this super nice because I'm just doing for demonstration purposes, but I'll go back through and wire this all in nicely tucked and everything. Sometimes you do have a connector like that one, you probably can't see very well, is slightly bent, so you can use a pick or a screwdriver and just kind of persuade those connectors back into place. Do not force these connections. Gently. I mean, you do have to give them some pressure, but like if it's fighting you, then that's a problem, and something is like that is fighting me, so I'll have to go back and fix that. But that does go into there. So once you connect all of those, the hand switches, you're left with three, I should say four technically. There's a flasher one that you'll plug in your flasher unit up here, and then you'll have three connectors left. I show four, and the reason being is because I've already separated this into two connectors. This is going to be your turn signal, other turn signal, and then this normally is your headlight switch. So on most bikes, you have a 4-switch or a 4-wire headlight. In our case, because my headlight connector is only a 2-wire, a negative and positive, you just need to use the green, which is the negative from the headlight. And then you can choose to use the light blue, which is what I use. I like the light blue because that's your high beam, so that when you have your high beams turned on, it'll show on your dash. So it lets you know, like during the day, that your headlights are on, versus if you use your low beam, you wouldn't normally know that. If you did want to use your low beam, all that you'd have to use is the white wire instead of the blue. So you'd use green and white if you want to use the low beam. If you want to use it as your high, you use green and light blue, and then we'll just plug that into there. Again, these orange and blue will both be to your turn signals. I almost forgot to mention that in each kit we'll obviously send diagrams that allow you to know exactly what you're plugging into where, what connections, as well as a full wiring diagram of all the harness. So should you need to change anything or want to wire things differently, that allows you to. And likewise, more connections, different plastic pieces, so you can wire things, again, how you want to. This is a photo of the LED flasher. Sometimes this is round, there's two versions, and that'll just plug in right into the top there where it says flasher on the front of your harness. Next, when we move to the rear of the bike or the rear of the harness, we have all these different things that need plugged into things. Additionally, you will have the one that we wired in, which is that XT60. We can put that out of the way for right now. A lot of this is going to be kind of more zoomed out. I will talk you through everything just because, again, my camera doesn't really capture up close colors very well, so I will talk out all the colors as I'm going through each process. So in here, the first step is you will have a little, let me put my arms right here, this little T off of here. These are going to be for your DC to DC converter, which is this one. And then this black connector is going to go for your relay. Those are on the bottom of my seat up here out of frame. You can see them kind of up there. So I put those on my seat. I cannot plug those in right now just because it's a little bit up out of the way. So the only way I can plug those in is once I close the seat. I will get those after, so we're just gonna act like those don't exist for this purpose. But again, those go into the DC to DC converter and the 72 volt relay. So next we are going to have off of the, we'll start on the sub harness side. So we plugged in the sub harness into our controller. You're gonna have this big connector here. That is going to be your hall sensor connector. So we're gonna account for that. That's gonna be out of the way. Next, working down the list, we will have a 4-prong blue, orange, red, and black brown connector. So blue, orange, red, and black, brown. So the big thing is make sure you double check all of your colors because you don't want to wire this wrong. This is going to be unused. Reason being is because this is our tuning port. Should we need to adjust tune or add power, take away things, whatever. So we'll just tuck that out of the way as well. So we're left with all these still and all these. Next, we'll look for a purple and gray. This is a single wire and a single wire that is yellow on the main harness. So purple and gray on here. Now this one you do have to watch because you do have a single wire that is purple as well as a single wire that is purple and gray. So that's going to be this one. And that's going to an ignition wire. So on the actual harness, it is labeled just like at the front, but still double check your colors. This is ignition is yellow, so plug that in there. Next, going down, we are going to look for that single purple again. So I set it out of the way, it's right here. And that is going to go to a single yellow and green wire, which is your high brake. So on the other side, we're looking for a single yellow and green, which is right, tangled in here. Next, we are looking for a 3-wire connector. It is black and white, brown and black, and green and white. So that's this one. So we'll take that over to the main harness side. And then that connects to a 2-wire connector, which is your gear connector, yellow and white wire, and a pink wire. Next, moving down the list, we have a 2-prong connector that is white and brown and black. So we are looking for a white and brown, brown and black. Anything with brown on it, make sure you just double check because a lot of these are very similar. And that is going to go to a 1-prong connector that is green and black. That is your parking brake. Interesting, I have seen this on some of them, so I will adjust it in my specs here. But some of my harnesses I've seen come from China. Instead of the green and black wire, it will have a yellow and orange. Love that, you know, because yellow and orange is definitely the same as green and black. So I will adjust that in here, but sometimes you will run into that. And I love how China just interchanges these things without telling you. So luckily, because I have the list, we can work through it, and because they're labeled, it says parking on it. So that is going to go to our white, brown, and black on the other side here. And then again, just confirming white, brown, and black. I will note on my paper to change that. Next, we are looking for a 2-prong connector, black and brown. Again, you'll hear me say brown a lot, which is why you need to make sure specifically that you are not interchanging these because they're often 2-prong connectors. So that's black, brown, and brown. And then that is going to go to the blue and yellow, which is sport. That's a single wire connector. That is your super mode. You need that. That's the fun stuff. Next, moving down the list, we have a 3-prong connector that is pink, green, and black off of the sub harness. And we are connecting that to a red, white, green, white, and black, white, which is your throttle. That's a 3-prong connector. Again, reiterating, I will send you a list, so this makes it really easy. You just work down the list and do it, just cross it off as you go. Again, just double checking the colors, because if you do cross these, you're gonna run into electrical issues. And electrical issues are one thing at 12 volt, but once you start doing it at 72, big difference. So next, we're looking for a singular white wire, which is your 1-line. As it's called, a 1-line, kind of like a CAN bus signal, but it's just a lot easier to work with, in my opinion. And that goes to a singular purple on the other side. This is just a bullet connector. Sometimes that one gets a little tough to push in. Be persuasive with it. You don't want it to come out, so that's good. A black, brown, and a gray and white wire off of the harness. And that is going to go to your reverse, which is black and yellow on the other side. So you will notice, once we connect these, you are going to have a few left over. This one, off of the main harness, you're gonna see 3 connectors. Same as what we saw up front, orange, light blue, and then this different 3-color connector. This is for your brake light and then your turn signals. So you can set those out of the way. So aside from those, you will should have 3 connectors left over. Those will all be unused. That's a CAN bus line that we don't need because we use the 1-line, an extra side brake, which you don't need, and an extra high brake that you don't need. All of those, again, unused. We do not need them. The Ruckus will function as it should. And likewise, we will have 3 that are unused on this side because we didn't use them over there. And then you also have your tuning port and then the hall sensor one. The hall sensor is the only sensor directly off of the motor. I do not have my motor hooked up yet, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with the motor itself. It comes right off with all the phase wires. You'll plug that in there. So that completes your wiring in the back. Pretty simple. The only other thing you'll have to do is wire in your turn signals just like you did up front, and then your brake light. So once you have that whole rat nest of everything roughly wired in, again, this is just for demonstration purposes. I will clean this up. You want to go ahead down here and plug in an XT60 to the XT60 that we wired in. That is going to be your last step. Worth noting here that I do not have the phase wires running from my motor to the controller. You will see once you take off this cover for the controller, they will be color coded, so you'll know where they go, as well as your main leads. So your battery and then your battery positive both go down to your giant connector that are on the bottom here. That's this big massive connector, but I'm not going to plug those in yet because again, my motor's not on. I'm just strictly doing the harness in this video. And then once you have your XT60 plugged in, and again, this will go to the controller, the main leads. This is going to be an open port. You will charge the battery with this port with your charger right here. So it just plugs into there. Wherever you decide to put this plug is solely up to you. So let's go ahead and check it out. See if it starts, if everything is wired up properly. Bam! That is great news. So you can see it is in kilometers per hour. You will have to convert that to miles per hour, but as far as electrical, it works as it should. It's good. We got our brake light. We'll go ahead and turn left turn signal. I need to put that in the battery box, which is why it's just hanging there. Left turn signal, right turn signal. And then also worth noting here, since I did put the headlight on the high beam switch, you can see that my headlight is not illuminated. That's why I really like it. You can see on the right side of the gauge cluster, there's a little high beam indicator. And I like that for my headlight so that I can physically see when the headlight is on and off during the day. It allows me to make sure I don't forget that I'm running with it. Technically, it is illegal, so fair warning, depending on where you're at, you may have to run that all the time, but I don't like to. Personal preference, and I can get pulled over for that. I am not by any means advising you do that, but that's how I do things. Also worth noting, if you first start the bike or you first key it on and this headlight is not on, you can see in the distance there, headlight on the wall. Sometimes this button will be compressed. The left one that looks like a light bulb here, all you have to do, that does kill 12 volt to your rear and to the front, so you can see there's no headlight. So all you do is press that and that'll bring all your 12 volt back. Very important. I don't know how many of these I've wired up and been like, oh no, it doesn't work. And it's all just because of that silly little button. So don't let that happen. So that in a nutshell is all you really need to do to wire this up. If you guys have any questions along the way in the process, any questions at all, drop it in the comments, let me know. That allows me to help you and likewise help the community and other people that might have the same questions. Happy to help. There is a little bit to it, but it's pretty user friendly. And like I said, I'll walk you through the whole thing. Have a great one, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.